Hey everybody, welcome back to the quest for the bestest from Backlog Banter. I'm Timo. I'm joined here in person at our BLB provisional studio at Tucker's house. We got Tucker, Tanner, and on the horn, Abram's FaceTiming in. He's hanging out. And today we are talking about An American in Paris from a good many years ago. Let's see what year.
1951.
1951. It's a Gene Kelly movie.
Got that one off the top of my dome.
It's got a lot of French in it. Not a lot of French, but it's got some French in it, given that it takes place in France. And it's a musical. We're going to get to add to our growing list of Best Picture musicals and think about where they go. And we have some thoughts about musicals that we might get into during this episode. But first, I think it's time to do some housekeeping. Do any of you want to do the housekeeping this time? Or should I just continue?
Just knock it out. Just go on.
Okay. Well, we talked about Lord of the Rings, Return of the King last week. A personal favorite of mine. And it ranked pretty far up there. I think it was the highest ranking film we've had in a long time.
Ooh, yes. Since we've re-ranked Godfather 2.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's been since episode 2 that one has gone up that high.
Well,
no, wait.
Gentleman's Agreement.
Gentleman's Agreement is above
Yes.
it, yeah.
Yes.
It went at place number 4 out of 31,
Yeah.
which is a pretty incredibly high spot for such a film. And we've had a lot of discussion about it. We did a review of the film of just Return of the King for Quest, and then we did a little special episode about all the rest of the Lord of the Rings movies because, well, they're kind of part of it too, I guess, sort of. We're just having fun
In a lot of ways.
But enough of that. Today, I'm feeling romantic.
Oh.
I feel like I want to hang out in the city of love.
The city of love, romance.
And
Oui, oui.
and do a little tap dancing and sing a little song. So, An American Paris, thoughts? Who wants to start? Tanner?
I do.
Oh, Abram wants to start.
Okay.
He's jumping right
Yes.
in.
I know. I'm very excited. I'm actually quite excited to talk about this movie. Because it's really weird. I think certain sequences of this film are some of the most inventive film sequences we've seen in any Quest movie. But also, it's a movie about basically nothing. I really don't frankly understand why this won Best Picture. I think it's very technically impressive and has some really great elements I want to get into. But it's kind of just an anomaly because what is it about? Why did it end the way it did? What's up with these long dream sequences? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. I don't quite know. I'll do my research actually right now, see what else came out in 1951. Strangers on a Train, The African Queen, and A Streetcar Named Desire, I would say, are the other big ones. And I would say all of those make more sense to win Best Picture, just going by what the Academy usually chooses. But slapping a musical somewhere in there, kind of fun to break things up.
Yeah, they do it on occasion from time to time.
But I agree with you. I think this is a very strange movie. I do think it's a very good movie. I think it's very representative of its time in terms of the use of color, the cinematography, the misogyny, all of that.
Very inventive in how they use misogyny.
Yeah, no, but I do think that it's fun because of that, but it also does take it some knocks down from a modern perspective. You're like, okay, well, this is kind of just, it's a Hollywood movie.
It is a classic, golden age of Hollywood movie. And that with it comes the benefits, the pros and cons of being that sort of movie. Because it's endearing, it's a solid movie, but then it makes some decisions that are a little strange for modern eyes and maybe for 1950s eyes. I'm not really sure what the general mood consensus of this was back then, but
what I read in I don't know where my book is. My Academy Awards complete unofficial history book that I love to peruse.
Yes.
Is that it was kind of middlingly acclaimed when it came out. People were like, oh, it's overindulgence. It's just too fancy. And it, kind of light on story, which I think we all kind of agree with.
I
Maybe
would agree.
The overindulgence, I wouldn't say is an issue in most of the movie, but it's interesting to see.
We'll get to the indulgence of this film.
It's
Timo.
interesting to see that it was kind of how we would have expected it to be received. Like, it wasn't like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing of all time. Back in the day, people were surprised that it won Best Picture.
Timo, what are your thoughts?
I pretty much agree with you guys. I think it is an enjoyable movie to watch. I think as a musical, it's pretty fun, and there's the song and dance is good. There's some good songs in there that I remember and I like. But it is strange, and it is pretty goddamn misogynistic. Yeah, it's not good on that front. But you talked about the color and the cinematography, something I really want to dive into. Some elements that I really enjoyed while watching this film. A couple shots that where I was like, holy crap.
Great shot.
I was like, that's an amazing shot. Like, good job on that. So, yeah.
Abram's got something to say. He's moving his lips. Preparation.
So I want to talk about Gene Kelly for a lot of different reasons. First of all, that man can move.
Holy shit, he's a rubbery fella.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he is. That opening, I was mesmerized by the sequence in his apartment when he wakes up and he's moving stuff and pulling out the cupboard and everything.
So,
that
me
was
too,
an
man, me
incredible
too.
sequence.
And
It's
so
a great
fluid.
character introduction as well.
Yes.
Because it's like, okay, he's living in this tiny space. He's got everything like on a dime in terms of his movement, his rhythm, all of that. And he's just going beep, bop, bop, bop. He's flipping the shit and like, it's so inventive. We're talking inventiveness in Two Towers. That's an inventive sequence.
It is so inventive, and he is so charismatic and such a good performer that you kind of overlook the fact that it literally does not matter that he's a painter. That's something I want to get into. Him being a painter means so little. Why isn't he a singer? Why isn't he a dancer? Because that's what he does in the film. I feel like this is a movie where there are so many elements that are here just to be here, just to paint this cozy look at Paris in the 50s. Doesn't matter that he's a GI. It doesn't really matter that he's a painter effectively. Why couldn't he have been a singer who was then found by Milo, right? That would have fit into his character because he's always singing, he's always dancing. Like, what's the point of his character? What's the point of his arc? What's the point of really anything that happens? I
His
suppose is my
paintings
question.
aren't even that good.
Well, one thing I would say is I think the reason that he's not a singer or a dancer is because the painter aspect of his character allows him to be kind of a loner, right? If he was a singer or a dancer, he'd be on stage. He'd be in front of crowds all the time. He'd be in a group of other people dancing or singing. But him being a painter, he can live in a tiny apartment and go out in a street corner whenever he wants. And there's not a schedule that he has to stick to. It's kind of just allows him to be sort of his own element. And also you have his artist buddies who are a musician and a singer, or I can't exactly remember what his other buddy is. But I think it's just that really. And plus, if he's a dancer, then and Milo picks him up, then she shoehorns him into a schedule, and he really has to do these things on time and interact with a lot more people, and it gives him less time to interact with his love interest and all this stuff. So I do think the painter aspect, while it's not integral to his like arc, it gives him a reason to do the things that he does as opposed to those other roles.
I think we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Should probably explain what happens in this film.
Oh.
Doink.
So Gene Kelly plays an ex-GI who's moved to Paris, or he just stayed in Paris after the war. He is a painter. He's not very good.
He's got some buddies. Oh, apparently he is pretty good.
He is a good painter.
According to the story.
Yeah, according to the story, he's good, but he's undiscovered. He's a hidden gem. And he just like hangs around. He doesn't have money. He meets this woman who wants to sponsor him and like bring him up, and then he meets this other woman, and all the problems and all the conflict and all the resolution in this film is through the women.
Yes, correct.
But I think, and to what I was kind of talking about, is I think that resolution only happens through one of them. You never have to reconcile his relationship with Milo. You never have to, either personally or professionally, right? There's this, oh, he's got the exhibition coming up, and oh, his work is being kind of commercialized and all of this. But ultimately, it never really matters because the film just kind of ends. So
It does.
Tucker,
It's a bad ending.
Yeah, I think you make good points about kind of like the practical nature of why he's in this profession, but I just don't necessarily think that it tracks against anything else that he really does in the film, even though conceptually it's a good idea to put him in that position.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to talk about the ending and how it doesn't necessarily do justice to those arcs and character dynamics that are set up, I do think that's one of the biggest detractors from the film. I think there's such an interesting set of character dynamics that are mostly introduced at the start of the third act, where they both love the same woman, and the sequence with his friend sitting in the middle, drinking the coffee, spilling over. That's a fan-fucking-tastic sequence.
He's lighting multiple cigarettes, and he's got them in his fingers,
And he's got the cigarette in his mouth, and he drinks it and then falls, and he's like,
But what I was getting at is that starts, I think, a really interesting concept for character dynamics and the conflicts going on behind the scenes, and no one really knows quite the full picture. But then you're right, it just ends, and it ends after, and I think we're probably all going to agree on this, that the most unnecessary lavish dream sequence that goes on for way too fucking long.
The last 20 minutes of this movie have no dialogue, and they really needed to wrap up any character arc, quite honest, any plot points, but they're all just left hanging. But what we do get is pretty colors.
very pretty colors. I think before we dive into that last sequence, why don't we talk about the song and dance of this film?
Oh,
It is
sure.
a musical.
Yeah.
A couple of the sequences that maybe stood out to you as good or as bad?
I Got is a very cute sequence where he's singing with all the kids. It's just adorable.
That's
Just
one of
what-
his best
it was,
movements.
tap dancing.
Yeah.
Well, the opening with with Lisa, I think
Yeah.
her name is, when she's like in the various pastel, well, not pastel colored, but just like
Monocolored
the
places.
monocolored things, and she's in a contrasting color, or is she in
Yeah,
the same color?
she's always in a different colored dress
Yes.
as the background. Yeah.
That's a great, and I mean, if we can talk about Lisa for a second, she is played by Leslie Caron. I think
Yeah.
it's probably a French name. I had never been in the movie before. Gene Kelly discovered her while he was going to a ballet in Paris, and he's like, I want her in my movie.
And she's great.
And she's great.
Yeah.
But apparently they didn't get along great on set because
Oh.
in the opening credits, we see Gene Kelly is the choreographer of this film.
Mm-hmm.
And he directed a lot of the musical sequences as well. And it was interesting reading some trivia about this because Leslie Caron, this is 1951. We're coming hot off the tails of World War II. She was in France during that time, so she, there was food rationing and all that stuff. So she was coming off of like malnutrition issues, and Gene Kelly would regularly get angry at her because she wouldn't like do the drills and stuff and repeat takes of scenes because she was like malnourished. And he's
Jesus
like, "No, just
Christ.
do it again. What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
She also she wasn't like fluent in English because why would you be if you live in France? And Gene Kelly would also get angry at her because she didn't speak English.
Damn. Well, that just brought down the mood.
Yeah. Well, I like this wonderful sequence.
Yes.
It's a good song. And I mean, I don't remember a huge amount of specifics about it, but it, left a good taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the dance sequences, the one down by the river between him and Lisa is incredible. This film has a lot of like very romantic elements to it, and that dance down by the river is definitely one of those. I'd also like to shout out quickly the costuming of all this, because Gene Kelly, good lord, I mean the flamboyant costumes like in the end sequence that we'll get around to eventually are great, but also like look at Gene Kelly in any of these scenes and tell me that he doesn't have just the best of drips on at any
He's
moment.
dripping
That
an insane
that
amount.
like tight blue polo with like the larger gray pants, that's a fire drip, Gene Kelly. I don't know if he's dead, but I don't think you would know what that means.
Yeah, I think basically bar none. We'll get to the last one when we get to it, but I think basically every song and dance number is incredible. For me, I think it peaks early with My Strauss. I think that's just so inventive in terms of how they're moving and recontextualizing the cafe and everything. But I was consistently mesmerized by their performances in those sequences, and each number was compelling. Frankly, I think the one by the river was probably the least interesting. It was a little bit more intimate and more about their relationship, which feels very forced and weird, especially like we were saying from a modern day lens. But on the whole, I think these numbers are why the film is so compelling.
Lisa's 19, by the way.
Oh. And he's probably 35 easily.
Keep in mind also the guy she's marrying knew her since she was like 13.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always in the back of my mind. And also, two different things about this. We watched this movie alongside my mother, who is a woman, and also, and also, it was a set designer for a long time. So she was mesmerized by the sequences, especially with Lisa in the first introduction of her with those monochrome backgrounds, and the set designs in this movie are very clearly like sound stagey. They're very clearly like, okay, this is like almost play-esque, and you can like tell that there's matte backgrounds and stuff, but I think it works really well for the tone. And she was always like, oh man, I would have loved to have picked out the flowers that went there, or built this street or something, because it really is, it's coherent, it's tightly designed, and it just looks fantastic. It really pops. But the other thing that my mom was constantly noting is the misogyny of this movie. And how, wow, no, Lisa, get away from him. This is not good for you, girl. Like, and
Neither of them are good for her.
exactly, yeah. She's put in really uncomfortable situations all the time. And I think she handles herself relatively well, but there's definitely like when they first meet the second time in the perfume shop, and he like forces himself like charmingly into her life, and like, okay, we're gonna go on a date now, and she's like, okay.
All
Like,
right.
oh, that's doesn't really feel like the same
yeah.
character.
Gene Kelly
but-
also 19 years older than Leslie Caron.
Yeah. Well, this background conflict is conflicting things about
On
him
people on
being
set, yeah.
the background information is definitely interesting for my reading of this film. in terms of the misogynistic elements. And mostly I blamed on the time period.
Yeah.
But it turns out there's a little more going on in the background. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to reframe my ranking of it, but it's definitely interesting to think about.
Yeah. I think we should just. I mean, we've talked about a lot of the weaker elements, like the side characters. While they have like their fun moments, like Adam in the.
Adam's his concert sequence.
Oh yeah,
where he's
that's also weird, isn't it? It's like a being John Malkovich-esque scene.
He's dreaming. It's another dream sequence, and he's the player of every instrument in the orchestra. I like that one.
What a great sequence.
Who is the composer of this? I was talking about this earlier.
Gershwin.
Gershwin composed this movie, and you can tell this movie's soundtrack sounds like a Gershwin suite through and through. I mean, you listen to Rhapsody in Blue, and you listen to a song from this film, or like just the background, and you're like, whoa, these sound very similar. It's very characteristic Gershwin, which I don't know if he really did that many film scores. I'm not really sure. I took a music literature class a couple semesters ago, and we talked about Gershwin and we talked about Rhapsody in Blue, but we didn't talk about any of his film scoring work. So I really don't know if he scored a lot, but I like the score. It's that new wave classical music kind of stuff with a lot of jazz and blues elements mixed in there, sort of. Gershwin's also a complicated figure when it comes into like stealing other people's music, but it sounds good.
I want to talk about one more thing before we get into like that final sequence and our thoughts on it. Is that part, like the black and white party scene? Cruella asks, shout out to our Cruella review, Card in the Corner.
I love that scene. Is crazy.
There's just a
mind-bogglingly.
She's just being thrown off the balcony, and then she goes back up and gets thrown off again.
If I could go to an art student party like that tonight, I would do it at a drop of a hat. That place looked crazy. That looked awesome. I think it was at a windmill too. I think it was in the inside of I think the outside was like there was a little exterior shown, and it was kind of like a windmill, which is like people wearing crazy black and white costumes at a windmill in Paris. Yeah, sign me right up.
And that is, of course, where we get the transition into, Lisa and Jerry is Gene Kelly's name, right? Mm-hmm. Lisa and Jerry have the final confrontation, and then the camera pans over, and her husband to be was standing there the whole time. And
there's word for that, yeah.
And then we just get a nice transition into the final 20 minutes of this film,
which I think the transition is very good. But Abram, do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah,
this final moment?
I want to make one note before we go into how the film transpires towards its ending. One note: I think it has a very clever script. I think the script for the film, on the whole, before it betrays the plot and the character arcs and everything, is full of some really quippy moments. I really love when Jerry is showing his artwork, and the American college student comes up. And he kind of shoos her away. And then he's like, it's always these third-year college girls making profound observations that they overheard or something. There's a lot of really great and cutting moments.
Ooh, that one hit a little close to home, I definitely felt.
No, but you're definitely right. I think the comedy in this film works very well. It's very understated. Like, they don't dwell on it. They're just like, that is a funny moment, and it's funny because they know it's funny, but they're not like just leaving space for it or anything. And I think that really made it engaging and endearing throughout. Is all these characters have these funny moments and these quippy lines, but it tonally works so well with the sort of otherworldly stage play-esque. Like, yeah, this is a staged comedy, and we're fine with it. Like, everything about this, we're going all in on.
Mm-hmm.
But the ending song and dance sequence.
Abram, I want to hear your thoughts first.
Epic proportions.
Lay it on us, big boy.
Let me draw an analogy that'll speak to Timo. This was the equivalent of the time travel sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's really pretty, but it goes on so long and has just no function in the narrative. But at least in that, our main character was going somewhere in 2001. In here, we just start dancing. We just dance, and then we stop dancing, and then we kiss Liz, and the movie ends. Like, what was the function of that? I understand that, this is him projecting what his life could be, but then his life becomes that. So what's really the function? I was thinking of La La Land, which is a film I really like, where there's that sort of melancholy dream sequence towards the end of the film where these characters are living out a life they will never have, and that at least had some sort of plot and thematic substance to it. This, I thought, was tracking in a similar direction, which is then undercut with the last 45 seconds of the film before it cuts to black. So I was like, good set design, so cool, the watercolor sets and everything, but what did any of it mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it really meant nothing to me when I was watching this. I was like, well, this is billed as a musical. There are some musical sequences, but the producers realized it had too much plot.
Yeah.
And they needed to add some non-plot to the end. Just throw it on there, and we'll have a great big musical sequence that costs $1 bajillion and takes a ton of time and effort to make, and then we'll wrap it all up in a nice bow and not give it a second's more thought.
I'm bleeding.
You are bleeding. That's kind of cool.
No, but I do think that one thing you mentioned, and we haven't really talked about the fact that this is a musical, but in terms of the musicals we have seen, Chicago, West Side Story, it's a lot less musical sequences than we're used to. There's another one coming up, which I very much love, My Fair Lady. We'll get to it eventually. But I think that this movie works best for me in terms of its musical elements because they're relatively understated. I think that the fact is they stay away from musical sequences for a lot of the film and allows you to develop the characters and get a greater sense of the world without being shoehorned into musical sequences all the time. And I very much appreciated that. I thought the musical sequences were just the icing on the cake. Like we've got this relatively interesting story with characters who are interacting all these ways, but and there's also this fun, engaging song and dance that you get into occasionally. Unfortunately, you're right. I think that we're looking at this film like, yeah, it is a musical. Okay, what if we ended it? We future projected the story and the character arcs through dance, like interpretive dance kind of thing, which personally I see as very pretentious and obnoxious, and I don't think worked very well for the pacing of the movie. Especially, I think the dream sequences are kind of like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? Because they are very different from everything else that's happening. So it doesn't work. I think the editing is bad. I don't really like that final sequence because it takes away from the character, the dialogue, the creative wordplay in the lyrics of the songs and just leaves you visuals, which is cool, but I don't think it works for this movie.
I also think that it's so long that you lose interest after not a short amount of time.
Yes.
If I may drop in some production notes,
Yes.
some production trivia facts. So this sequence took 1 month to film.
Holy moly.
I don't know why, because it's complicated, but it's not like 1 month of filming complicated.
I'm sure there are other notes about how
Yeah,
they retake things.
But it also cost $500,000 at the time, which in today's money is a measly $5.1 million.
Pocket change.
Pocket change, really.
Just drop $5 million on a scene that we're gonna rag on.
And for that big, a lot of money and time they spent on it, the colors are great. The sets are great, but the way it's filmed, and I tried to describe this to Tucker after we got done watching it. It looks like when I would stay too late at my babysitter's sometimes, and she would always watch PBS because she was 60 years old. And it would be 8 o'clock, and they would just have local theater productions of various musicals on TV, and it's filmed like that, which is the antithesis of the golden age of Hollywood's filming style,
or what they were doing
past.
previously
Exactly.
in the movie.
It just looks cheaper, and but that doesn't make any sense. With what I just said, $500,000 a month of filming, and it looks and it's filmed poorly, I'll even say.
Very interesting. Well, because I haven't really, we mentioned it at the beginning, but we didn't get to dive into it. I think the cinematography in this film is just downright excellent, barring this ending sequence. I think there are so many shots. There's that POV shot right at the beginning where he's walking and there's the narration and he's saying hi to the neighbors, and then it shifts out of POV. And this is back in the 50s. These cameras are huge. This thing is on a dolly.
There's a mirror shot in there too.
And then it becomes a mirror shot. And I'm like, okay, mirror shot in the 50s, awesome. And then they do some messing around. There's oh, that guy's too young. He's not me. And then they move, and then it's Gene Kelly. That shot is great. It's so creative. It moves so well. I'm immediately notice it's a POV shot.
Yeah.
And there's countless examples of very creative framing and composition, as well as the use of color and lighting in this film is just downright excellent, I think, in every scene. But you're right, Tanner. This ending is it's just different.
Out of place.
It's out of place. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really, I was really enjoying the movie up until that point, and it just really dragged it down. And then the final, the cherry on top is the last 45 seconds, like Abram said, where what's her fiance's name?
Oh, Henri.
Henri, thank you. Henri inexplicably brings her back to the party so she can have a happy Cinderella ending with Jerry, and then the credits roll. They're
Yeah.
like, well, why did they come to that conclusion? What does this mean? What about these other characters? What's going on? What did all that just mean?
What about his paintings?
What about his relationship? He's being like with Kay or whatever, the art dealer or whatever she was.
Kay, I think, is Michael Corleone's wife, actually.
I don't remember what her
Milo.
I don't know where.
Oh, her name is Milo. I forgot that her name was Milo. My bad.
Where'd you get Kay from?
I don't know.
Probably Godfather.
It was on the cast list.
Oh,
It was a character
actors.
named Kay.
Okay.
But yeah. Oh yeah, because she says like Venus or whatever, or Venus Day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is
is funny.
a good line.
I think this is a film made by really professional artists who had nothing to say. And it kind of feels that way in the end, I think, because we talk a lot about the creativity of sequences in the execution of these elements. But what does it build to? What does it mean? What is it saying? And my opinion is nothing, which is disappointing, I think.
And I think that also ties back to the fact that this movie is thematically empty. Like, there's no deeper meaning to it. I think at that point, it's like, okay, well, what are we saying? But also, the romance, as you said, is pretty forced. And I think that if they were trying to say something about love, it didn't work because they just were like, hey, these people are in love now, lol. And we're like, oh, well, I guess I can believe that, maybe. But it does feel like really overly perfect, like, storybooky Hollywood ending and plot contrivance, which is like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, overall, it's enjoyable. I feel like if they halved or quartered the last bit, and I mean, even if they kept in the bookend there that wraps everything up in a.
I have a quick note for a trivia fact that might explain some of our issues with the writing. This script was finished in a 12-hour stretch right before the writer had to go to his own wedding.
Wait, so they wrote this? Did they write this movie in 12 hours?
He finished it in a 12-hour stretch. I don't know how much writing he did before, but he finished it in one 12-hour stretch right before his wedding.
Now that is crazy.
Yeah.
That's like, man, I can't sit and write for more than like 45 minutes at a time. So
I assume it was probably most of it if he was writing for 12 hours.
And also, he had something important.
Yeah, he kind of had something.
yeah, he
important
did
coming
kind of
up.
have to go to his own wedding. Maybe that's what he was inspired to do the ending with. He was like, man, I really wish I wasn't marrying.
Maybe
this
he wanted to
woman
make a
that I'm
happy
going to
ending
marry.
because he was going to get married,
Yeah,
But it doesn't work for the story, I should say.
that's very interesting.
Yes.
Any final thoughts as I tabulate our votes here?
Actually, I have two final things.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tucker.
These are just, we can talk about them as long as we want, but there's voiceover in this movie, which we don't get from a lot of movies, but I think it's really fun. It's an interesting, like, quippy commentary from this otherworldly voice that's like, okay, I really enjoyed that. Which I don't know what you guys think about it, but also this movie has like one of the most egregiously terrible green screen shots I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, the green screen shots are really, really bad.
Yeah.
I
Yellow
literally,
line around her head.
Yeah.
I can do a better green screen shot with no green screen.
Yeah.
Now, see, it is now 70 years later, so I would say that is it's interesting that they even had that kind of technology back then, which I was not aware of. But it looks terrible and it does not hold up, and it's very jarring when you're watching them sit in the car.
There
and
are
there's a
other
yellow
movies
line.
at the time that can pull that off,
Or
where
they
you
can
don't
use
have the compositing
They can
line
use
around
rear
the actors.
projection, or they can. There are other techniques to do these in the car shots with the stuff moving in the background when you're not actually filming in a car moving around.
Yeah.
Also, why even green screen that shot? Like, you're
Exactly.
in Paris. Why don't you either get out of the car or you're stopped at a
No,
red
they
letter?
didn't.
Why-
Oh,
like,
actually,
there's so
They
many
did not
solutions.
film this in Paris.
Yeah,
They filmed this in
Kelly,
Hollywood.
Gene Kelly wanted to film this in Paris, and he was pissed that they're like, no, we're going to film it at MGM.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just filmed it in
Really?
Hollywood.
There's
Yeah,
all sound stages.
all
Except for
sets.
like some shots at the beginning are actually
Well, there's a
Paris.
montage. Where
Yeah, there's like
it's
an
pictures.
establishing
Yeah.
montage.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I genuinely, I guess, shout out to the set design
Hey.
then, because I genuinely did think it
pretty
was
good.
filmed in Paris.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Any more thoughts before I reveal our vote?
I'm spent.
You're spent.
Yes.
We are incredibly unanimous about this. We almost all put the exact same number where this goes. In fact, 3 of us put the same number, 22. That's Tucker, me, and Abram all put it at 22, and Tanner put it just a smidge higher at 19, which rounds out to a very nice even number of 21.25, otherwise known as, in our ranking system, 22.
Okay.
Well, all right. I guess
Great.
I guess I'm outvoted here.
The laws of math just said, Tanner, Your vote doesn't matter.
It's all right. Whatever.
Now, actually, I don't know how long we want to spend on this because the three of us are very unanimous on it. But Tanner, you putting it at 19 puts it just above West Side Story, and also above what?
Look at the list. Okay, we did a little thinking, we did a little figuring, a little list reconfiguring, and well, we have a slightly new number. It actually ends up at 22.25 when we look at the votes based off of the accurate list. There was a little bit of an outdated list that I was using. That's my bad. But we fixed it up, so 22.25 means 23, which would put it in the
Between
spot of the last
French
Emperor.
Connection and The Last Emperor, just above The Last Emperor.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very solid place.
Yeah, sure.
I think this movie is really well made. We were praising it most of the time, but again, we're talking about really good movies overall. I think it lacks the thematic importance and character depth that we like of our highest movies, right? This is very classically Hollywood, but it's nothing more than that.
Yeah.
The reason
last thing
Abram, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. The last thing I wanted to say is, again, I use The Last Emperor as my barometer for when a film bores me.
Yes,
And
that's my
I think-
boring threshold.
And I think that this is not a boring film. Its problems really crop up, in my opinion, in hindsight when you realize how thin the characterization and the plot elements are. But when you're watching it, I remember the sequences we were talking about of Gene Kelly waking up and recontextualizing his apartment for breakfast and all of these numbers and everything. They do make the film enjoyable on a first watch, but we're talking about the best films according to the Academy, right? So we can't just think, okay, this is fun to watch when it's pretty flowery and meaningless otherwise, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That last sequence left such a sour
Yeah.
taste in my mouth that I had to put it below the boring threshold because it was actually boring to me to just watch that go on and on and on and on. And I think that, comparing it to The Last Emperor, you're right, Abram. This film just is fairly vapid in terms of theme, and we can discuss about The Last Emperor. We can open that can of worms again, but I think The Last Emperor has a little bit more on this film. But you're very right. It's very technically impressive, and it's fun to watch for the most part about it until you think about it.
So
I'm happy where it goes.
My thesis here, it's a very good movie. It's not a good Best Picture winner. When we're comparing it against the rest of these, it doesn't stack up because it's lacking those elements that we really want out of some of the best movies of all time. But for a movie I can watch, I could rewatch this. I think it'd be really fun to rewatch just to watch those colorful and inventive sequences and be like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. But I mean, yeah, when in comparison to some of the best movies of all time, it doesn't have a lot.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. I don't really have an overarching thesis statement. I agree with all you. All good takes here at BLB.
This is not a very divisive
No, absolutely
episode.
not.
And
That's fun.
I mean, yeah, it's good for our health to do that every once in a while.
Healing up both Abram and Timo coming off of some symptoms of things.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, both of us have not been having the goodest week in health land. Shall we take a visit to the
please.
parlor of spin
Oh, yes.
and sing a little tune and spin a little wheel?
I can do a little tap dance. Well, we don't have my feet in here, so unfortunately, I can't do a little tap dance routine.
Bring your feet up into the camera.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna get demonetized again.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine by me.
Well,
There's the tap dancing, ladies and gentlemen. Gene Kelly, eat your heart
Let's do
out.
this.
you
Eat
ready?
your cold
Yes.
dead heart out.
I've got the spin wheel pulled up. Are you ready?
Yes.
2, 1.
Wheel, wheel, what is your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, wheel, what is your deal?
And with that very perfectly timed rhyme, we have a number. It is the number 27.
Right in the middle.
27, right in
Yeah.
the middle.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
Number 27 gives us a 70s movie. Once again, we're returning to the classic BLB land where
The
we've been
swinging
stuck
70s.
in the
The
70s and
70s.
80s. And it gives us something very interesting directed by Michael Cimino and starring Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken and
Oh.
Meryl Streep, who's a little bit down. But this is The Deer Hunter.
We were just talking about this the
Oh,
other day.
okay.
Yeah, this is a Vietnam War movie. Right?
Well, yes. Yeah, I think it's like a dual timeline. It takes place in Vietnam and then afterwards, I believe.
Okay. I don't know a lot about this. Do you guys know? Have you seen it, Tucker?
No, the only connection that we have to it is we discussed it with my dad a couple days ago,
Yeah.
who said when he was in high school, I don't know, he's old, that this was one of those movies that they would see a bunch of times. Like this was the talk of the town.
Yeah,
for
he grouped this in with like Animal House, which is like a fun college toga party movie, and this one is about like Robert De Niro is coming to terms with PTSD, and they're playing like Russian roulette in a POW camp.
Oh my God.
And it's like 3 hours long.
So this is a heavy movie.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 3 hours long. Yes.
Letterboxd is saying it's 184 minutes, so we're in for another Best Picture.
Yeah. But yeah, the only thing I know about this is that there is a scene with Russian roulette. That's the only thing I know about this movie.
I'm very excited for this one. We talked about this movie a lot in a circumspect way in my film class, talking about other Vietnam cinema. So this is actually on my list to watch. So
Nice.
I'm excited to watch
give it
it.
a look.
I hope you guys are too. And Quest viewers, if you are watching along with us, I mean, what a good time to be watching a lot of Best Picture winners.
Yeah.
I think it's always a good time to be watching Best Picture winners.
Yeah,
if I do say so myself. Well, next week we'll be talking about The Deer Hunter from 1978, directed by Michael Cimino. It's got a pretty good cast.
Yeah.
We talked about it. I hope you guys will join us. Thank you, as usual, Tucker Tanner Abram, for joining me here. And, we'll be back next time. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, rate it 5 stars, download it on Spotify. There's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do to help us out. And I think we'd really appreciate it. All right, we'll be back next week. Peace.
Au revoir.
He also has the jocular energy flowing in because he's going to jockle a little bit in this.
on camera.
Abram, did you hear they're making Joker 2?
I thought this is Joker 4 because Joker 2 is Promising Young Woman and Joker 3 is Cruella.
Cruella.
That's true.
Those are both prequels.
The
And
Jo-
then the Joker 4 is a team up.
Oh, yeah.